in that range.
But they're long. Look at these
Some
questions.
of them are, yeah. We had 2 left over from last week. Hello! Welcome to Behind the Scenes of AV Rant. Yeah, this is the Behind the Scenes live feed. It's
Julia Child's podcast.
That's right. It is Tom and me talking to each other, and we needed a way to do that. And we figured, hey, we'll throw it out there live. So yeah, if there's any technical glitches, that's the way it's going to be here. Yeah, there's a completed version that goes up later in the week. It's got times in the show notes that can let you jump around to whatever question you want. Okay, I think that's it. You've been warned, and whenever Tom pleases.
Oh my God. There's no way we're going 2 hours tonight. Just so you know.
Oh, nah.
We'll see. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. We're back on a Tuesday night because Tom still has kids at home and his beard has grown longer. So, you got to check in every week,
not
folks.
thicker. Not thicker. It is longer. It is in no way thicker. It's still very much a leprosy beard, I'm sorry to say. I do have news to report. I finally got bored enough that I installed my SVS Prime elevation speakers on my ceiling.
Nice. So these have now become your top middles?
Top middles, yes.
Right.
They are properly positioned, whatever. I don't care. So, yeah, I continue the tradition. And if you've read my reviews over the years, you will know that I tend to find the things that nobody else finds wrong with things.
Okay.
Like things will come to me and everything, and nobody else will ever report it, but it will happen to me because I am a reviewer or whatever. But yes, so I have had issues with my top middle speakers.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately, I knew it was wrong. I knew something was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was installing them and then they were wobbling, and they should not wobble. They should. The biggest problem I had with installing the top fronts was that when you put them into the mount, it's like a keyhole mount, and you slide them to the side. Right. You slide them to the side, and that sideward sliding is the hardest part because it's really tight. Because you gotta, get them all locked in there.
Now your front heights, which are also prime elevation speakers, are those mounted on your front wall, but just way up high? Okay.
Yes. Okay. They are on my front wall, way up high. So these were on the ceiling. It's the same mount, but they have a little rubber thing that goes between the wall and the mount is actually kind of a U-shaped.
Yeah.
It looks like a hat channel. I found out recently from watching a video, and you put this little thing in there to help make sure that there's no vibrations in there.
Right.
Well, this thing's wobbling around like crazy. I mean, like a multiple inch wobble from side to side, which is not. Front to back, which is not correct. I knew it wasn't right, so I thought maybe I'd done something wrong. So I called SVS customer service, did not identify myself at all, and said, this is the problem. And Corey, who was the person who answered the phone, said, hey, I've never heard of this. This is a new one for us. I've never installed these speakers myself. So hold on a second. Let me talk to one of my engineers. Yeah. And he put me on hold for less than a minute. And he said, so could you take some pictures and send it to us? Because this is something we've never heard of before. I'm like, I know.
I'm discovering things.
That's right. So I basically took a video. I have the thing installed. I have the little rubber thing. It's really cool. It's like it slides in there. It's supposed to sort of lock the pins in place.
Okay.
It has a little lip that goes to lock the things in place, and then it's got magnets to hold the rubber, in place so that there's no chance it's going to vibrate itself out or something like that. It's a very nifty little thing. And I just took a video of it. I just rocked it with my finger back and forth. I'm like, it's not supposed to happen, right? I didn't say that. Clearly it's not supposed to happen. No. So I sent that at some point in the afternoon, and to Corey. He told me just send it to whatever attention Corey, and I'll get it and I'll get back to you. And by the evening, I got an email that said, we've talked to engineers, and it seems like what's probably wrong is that the pins, because the pins that come out the back on the mount on the back of the speaker are too long.
Okay.
Like, well, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah,
like, I
that
could
makes
tell
sense.
you that.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say that to you because I thought maybe I was doing something wrong. I want to give you the chance to tell, without me sounding like a complete imbecile. I also don't want to be this guy like, your pins are too long. This is crap. Blah. So it's like, we're going to send you some new ones. And then it got, well, I didn't send it from my AV Rant email, but my email does have it's got my name on it.
Right.
And it's also got, my signature line. It's also got something about, host of AV Rant. So Ed Mullen, who is somebody else over there who's pretty high up,
one of the
emailed
gurus.
emailed me personally afterwards and said, we're sending you both the mount and the wall bracket just in case, and we tested them ourselves. These ones work. We've never had this happen before. I'm like, dude, this is so not your fault. This is me.
And
this
it's not as though you haven't
had
previous ones of the exact same model that were just fine. So
just fine.
Yeah.
Yes, just fine. So so Corey, not knowing who I was, because I literally did not even tell him my name when I was talking to him, and I just sent him an email. And do you read signature lines? Because I don't. So I'm sure he didn't read anything about it, at least at first. And he took care of it within more than the reasonable time, and was sending me something, just wanted my address.
Yeah.
And that's all he wanted. Yeah. So customer service SVS once again proves itself to be perfect. And these things, it doesn't make, every time, it's like every time you're trying to do anything in your house, you're like, all I have to do is just, and when whatever comes after just is absolutely wrong. And all I have to do is just install these speakers and I'll be done. And my home theater will be finished, and then it'll be fine. No. That's not how things work. No. Yeah. So,
well,
SVS was great.
I'm glad to hear that your woes have been home theater related. I debated with myself whether to say anything, but you know what? This is a community. I consider people who listen to AV Rant my friends, and I've usually kept a pretty darn positive attitude, I think, through most things thick and thin. I'm not in a good mood today. That might be the first time I've just said that outright on a podcast, and it's because I want to do something that I hope will be a bit of a public service, which is I'm calling a lot of people, most of our listeners are in the United States. Most of the United States is not yet at the point where they're saying, hey, we're flattening the curve, or we're at the peak of this thing. Still seems to be going up in pretty much all the states. So in a way, I'm calling you from the future, because BC, British Columbia, the province where I live in Canada, we put out basically one headline saying it looks as though our curve is beginning to flatten. This is good news.
Oh, God.
But these are the numbers. Our numbers on Saturday and Sunday. Still new cases being reported, but not as many as the Saturday and Sunday from last week, and not as many as were on Friday. And they put that out there. And of course, this weekend and Monday, the number of people out and about who are definitely not going to work. Okay, there are people going to work. We want them to be able to get to work. These are people doing essential jobs, because that's all that's open right now. And we need these people.
Yeah.
And that includes myself. And we need to be able to do our jobs effectively without people just going out for recreation. The message of, yes, good. It's an unqualified good thing that our curve appears to be beginning to flatten. That there's no downside to that, and that I don't want any public officials lying or anything like that. The numbers are the numbers, and what they need to stress, though, is keep it up. Right. Now is not the time to start relaxing and breathing a sigh of relief and going out. I saw one woman out with 5 kids, and they were talking about how they're off to see their grandma.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is so irresponsible on so many levels, and taking public transit to do it. Why would you want to get on a bus right now? Like, the mentality of that, like, if you have to, because this is how you get to your essential job, that is why the buses are still running, folks. Not so you can take a gaggle of kids on a bus that could very easily have things hanging around on its metal surfaces inside. So yeah, folks.
You're a little frustrated, Rob. You're a little frustrated. This is Canadian rage.
Yeah.
This is what I'm hearing right
Yeah.
now.
And I mean, thankfully, the worst thing we can say about our president is that he said the word moistly, and that was like the biggest gaffe he's made. So hey, things could be worse. But yeah. For when your curves start to flatten, and some people are living in countries where it already has, and they're ahead of where most of Canada is. BC seems to be ahead of most of the other provinces because we shut down our borders like a little bit earlier than Ontario did, and that was to our benefit. Everything is telling us that the moment people start gathering again, the caseloads start going back up. So when your curves start to flatten, if they haven't already, please do whatever you can to encourage everyone to keep it up, stay at home, and don't start coming out. And I get it. It's frustrating. You're cooped up. The weather finally turned a little bit nice around here, and that's a rarity in Vancouver, so you got to take advantage when it does. I get it. But don't. Please, if anybody was thinking they would. And I don't think it's our listeners. But anyway, that's been my mindset. I'm sorry about it, but it's out there now, and I'm done. Home theater. Here we go.
That's fine. Yeah, I was right now. We are really in where I am at in Florida. We're very quickly approaching hopefully the peak, but we're definitely on the upswing. So my wife has been desperate for me not to leave the house to go shopping. Yeah. So I didn't shop all weekend, and I did go shopping today, and it was still like, I don't know what 6 feet looks like for some of you people, but I know what 6 feet actually is, and you actually touched me.
It's farther than you think. Feet. That's right.
And I just, I the last time I went shopping, not this time, the last time before that I went shopping, I went to the store and I tried to do the self checkouts because then I know, because I see the people, they wipe their hands and then they pull the bags out for you or whatever, and you can. I'm holding a wipe, a disposable wipe, and I'm wiping my hands and wiping everything I'm touching and everything else. All the food I'm picking up, I'm wiping before I put it into the bags or whatever. So I try to do that, but at this one store, I couldn't do that. So the guy was bagging the one thing I got from the store, the one thing I needed from the store, and he was having trouble with the bag, and he reached up and he licked his fingers, and then he pulled the bag open. I was like, I don't know how to react right now, but I got home to my wife. I said, nobody touches this bag. Nobody sits in the back, because it was in the back seat of my car. Nobody sits in the back seat of my car for at least 4 or 5 days. I'm parking my car in the sun. I don't care. Nobody gets anywhere near this bag. I'm like, it was just like, my mind was complete. I was thinking of all the places he touched it and everything else, and I'm like holding it like it's a bomb. I feel like Nicolas Cage in The Rock when he's got those weird little balls of death. That's what I felt like. So yes, we have to be safe. We have to be careful. There's only so much you can do.
Yep.
There's only so much you can do. There's only so much you can control. You got to go out. You got to get food. You got to go out. You got to do certain things. Yes, try to minimize it, but we're here to make our home theaters as good as possible, so that
it's enjoyable to stay home.
I don't know if this comes up in our news here, but my wife read an article about a hermit guy. Mm-hmm. He lives by himself, away from people, and he wrote an article or was interviewed about how to be a hermit. And one of the things he did, he built himself a home theater so that he could watch movies.
We can relate.
And just have something to do. And he had this catalog of 300 movies, so that when his mood got dark, because he was living alone, he has this catalog of 300 movies that are all uplifting that he watches. One of the ones he'll watch when he does this. And I was just like, that's right, because home theater makes all of this possible. We can all live through this if we have a home. If we were stuck at home listening to a sound bar, we need home theater. So let's make it happen, guys. All right, this is AV Rant, the home the podcast that will answer your home theater and AV questions. And to get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask them by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You can go to www.avrant.com, leave us a comment there. Facebook.com/AVRant Podcast. A very good way to get in contact with us. It actually beeps on my phone when you send us a question there.
Oh, I hardly ever get alerted. I try to check in once in a while.
You do a good job, Rob. And I check in and I'm like, oh, Rob will answer that.
Great.
Sometimes I answer it, but most of the time I'm like, oh, Rob's got that one. You can youtube.com/AVRant podcast for our videos. Rob's direct line is Rob at AVRant.com. His Twitter's at First Reflect. I'm Tom at AVRant.com. My Twitter is at AVRant_Tom, a completely dead Twitter account, but feel free to at me.
It still posts when the podcast goes up. That's all we need.
Does it really?
Yeah.
Surprised. All right. I want to thank our listeners of the week. Become a listener of the week. You have to do is support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to AVRant.com. Click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link and go to a PayPal donation site, which will take your credit card information or your PayPal information and send some monies to us. So we want to thank Joseph for doing that this week. Thank you very much, Joseph.
Indeed, Joseph. Thank you so much for the support via PayPal.
We also want to thank our 112 patrons over at patreon.com. Patreon is a service that allows you to sign up for a monthly subscription, just like if you're subscribing to NPR or one of those, continuing subscribers or whatever, supporters. So $1 a month minimum, and as much as you want on top of that would be great. We want to thank our 112 patrons, including Kevin. So thank you very much, Kevin.
Yeah.
And our 111 others.
Indeed, that's patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up. And thanks so much to our 112 patrons over there. Kevin, thank you for being one of them.
And a different Kevin, if you can't support yourself, support yourself. If you can't support us financially, which I completely understand, especially in these times, then if you think of some way to support us, let us know what that is, and we will mention you. So a different Kevin dropped our names to Mark over Accessories for Less when he bought a Denon X7200 WA plus a 5-year warranty. So thank you very much, Kevin.
Yeah, Kevin, thank you very much. And we know Mark is very much aware of us, and he appreciates hearing that we're still sending people his way. So that's very nice. Thank you.
And a couple of people let us know that they're very happy that we're still doing our extremely long podcast to help them while away the time until they can leave their house again. So thank you, Patrick, Justin, and Hank, for thanking us.
That's right. I'll mention Patrick, Justin, and Hank. And once again, I'm sure other people have said thank you elsewhere, Facebook and Twitter and whatnot. So to everybody who is grateful that we're still going, we are grateful that you're still listening. So thank you very much.
All right, in the news, Disney announced that they'll fix the Simpsons' first 19 seasons on Disney Plus, so they're the proper 4:3 aspect ratio instead of a cropped down 16:9 with the top and bottom cut off. They said the change will happen by the end of May, or whenever whoever the guy is that does that gets over his corona. They also put Onward on there like really super fast.
They really did. Yeah.
I watched it like a couple of nights ago. I was like, I was about to buy it from Amazon Prime.
Right.
And I'm like, it's on Disney Plus already. Wow, this is great.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily expect that because that's their subscription streaming service. I was expecting Onward to show up, via you pay $20 for it. And it might even as a 24-hour rental because it was still in theaters like just a week or two ago.
Yeah.
Well, whatever theaters were open 3 weeks ago.
I hope this is the new normal, but I also hope that. Well, I mean, they're not going to. The Marvel movies won't apply since they pushed everything back. Yeah. I hope this is the new normal because this is great. That was great.
Yeah, that part works out for subscribers. Good deal.
Yeah, the movie's pretty good. Samsung Display has made it official that they will stop manufacturing LCD panels entirely at the end of 2020. This does not mean that Samsung Electronics will stop making LCD TVs, including QLEDs. It just means they will be getting the LCD panels from one of the Chinese OEMs. So that just happens all the time.
So Samsung Display is the manufacturing arm of Samsung. They won't be making LCD panels anymore.
Yeah. I guess their manufacturing facilities in South Korea and China will transition to making QD OLEDs and micro LED displays. Instead, no official word on where Apple will get its iPhone LCD displays now because no one cares.
They were all from Samsung. I mean, it's funny because Apple and Samsung are these huge smartphone rivals, but for all the iPhones that use LCD displays, they were getting them from Samsung Display, so that's how business rolls. Who knows? Maybe all iPhones will just have OLED screens now because, the X and 11 did, so yeah.
All right, Mike. Mike says he figured he'd share another update on his home. This is comments.
That's a comment, yeah.
Sorry, I scrolled past the comments before figuring out what that was. I thought it was more news. Mike figured he'd share another update on his home theater construction progress. In the previous photo, the trimmer on his DIY wall panels was white, but as we suspected, that was just primer. Mike wanted to share that he found Bear's Scruff Defense paint lives up to his name. It's basically a matte finish, but it's about as durable as an eggshell finish. Not as durable as gloss, but an obvious improvement over the regular matte or flat. He also ordered 3 recliners from HT Market after hearing our interview. He has to wait a little bit for stock to arrive, which is not the norm, but we can all understand that being the case right now. And I wipe everything down with a wipe.
leave it in quarantine of itself for a week there. Make sure all surfaces are dyed off. Yep.
Yeah. And Mike has to wait for new carpet anyway, so completion of Mike's theater will be delayed, but it gives him a chance to repaint the rest of the walls and fully finish his acoustic treatments, which is great. This is great to be doing all this. I'm telling you, man, if you're making updates on your home theater, now is the time.
Yeah,
now is
by
the time.
all means.
And I mean, I've been to a lot of stores for a lot of different reasons because I have 3 boys and a wife, and I have found that Home Depot, I haven't been to Lowe's. Home Depot was one of the first ones that was doing a really good job of social distancing and making sure people were staying far apart.
Yeah.
In fact, our main chain of grocery stores here, Publix, is doing an atrocious job. It's getting to the point where I don't even want to shop there anymore. Even though my kids are like, I only like the yogurt from Publix. I'm like, well, then I guess you ain't eating yogurt then, are you? Because I'm not going there anymore because those people, I mean, they're not doing a good job. And I feel like it's dangerous going in there for I mean, I still love the store, but they're just making some bad decisions. Herb wanted to mention that even though his Denon X4400H got a firmware update that specifically mentioned getting eARC support, he hasn't been able to get it to work with his LG C9 OLED. He tried getting new HDMI cables that are premium, high-speed certified, and definitely have the Ethernet channel as we instructed, but no dice. Turning eARC off on his C9 OLED got Atmos working from the built-in streaming sources, so his X4400H seems to work with regular old ARC just fine. Just something to keep in mind if others are experiencing ARC or eARC related audio problems like Herb was. So
that's disappointing to hear. And who knows, maybe another future firmware update will get it fixed, or I don't know exactly what the issue was there, but eARC is a very brand new thing. It definitely does require HDMI cables that have the Ethernet channel. So if you have older HDMI cables, that's entirely possible that it could be the cause of the problem. But the whole idea is that you're supposed to be able to say, take an Ultra HD Blu-ray player, plug it directly into your TV, not into your AV receiver, and then use the enhanced audio return channel to send it downstream from the TV to your AV receiver, basically using your TV as the HDMI switch instead of your AV receiver. So hopefully it will get sorted out in the future at some point, but still growing pains as far as eARC goes.
All right, RD wanted to share some updates. This was the house where some NXG brand in-wall speakers were already installed when RD bought the house. Then he recently got a deal on some GTL Sound Lab in-wall speakers to replace his front 3, and he had asked us previously if he should get any external amps or a more powerful receiver than his Denon X3600H, since the GTL speakers were rated for 175 watts. He followed our advice at first, and at his normal listening levels, everything was fine, but the new GTL speaker sounded so much better than the NXGs that he found himself turning up the volume. The old speakers sounded unpleasant, sometimes even painful when turned up loud. The new speakers just sounded nicer and nicer the louder they got. The 3600H was fine, although he admits that he has it in an AV cabinet with limited airflow. It never shut down on him, but it did get quite hot. So he added a couple of Class D Crown amps. Class D, of course, has very high output, very low waste of power and heat.
Yeah, very efficient at turning the electricity into actual useful sound.
That was the words I was looking for, and it didn't come to my head, so thank you, Rob. He did not notice any difference in this quality of sound, but the X3600H is unquestionably cooler to the touch right after a movie now, and the Crown amps are very efficient, so they stay nice and cool too. He's impressed with all of it. He's enjoying his full Atmos setup very much now, and it just makes him feel better that the Denon is clearly not having to work too hard now. Sure, fine.
Yeah. I mean, good news was even when he turned up the volume, it's not as though the X3600H shut down. So we were correct that it wasn't like actually necessary to have amplifiers. And originally we were thinking that he was going with fairly low volume levels because he said that was his intention. But yes, this can be the case once you get speakers that are not distorting at higher output levels. They do sound really darn good when you turn out the volume. So all good all around. We have no problem with having separate amplifiers around here. Tom and I both have them. So when it makes sense, it makes sense, and glad you're happy with the results.
So since I mentioned maybe having people send in their home theater stories, Gurinder thought it might be fun if people shared their home theater blunders, such as the time he was trying to clean up his rat's nest of wires behind his entertainment center, but he had forgotten to turn off his amplifier. He made a big spark when he accidentally touched some speaker wire leads together. Everything shut off. Thankfully, his TV was okay after a reset, but he had fried the HDMI ports of his receiver and his Blu-ray player. So I've killed on an old receiver. I did that when I was switching like speakers out, and I didn't turn the receiver off, and I killed an amp channel doing that. But that's happened to me as well.
Yeah. Well, sorry to hear about that, but I mean, it is fun to commiserate, and if other people have had blunders, Gurinder would like to hear about them, so that'll be all right.
Speaking of Gurinder, let's get to him. He'll have his first question tonight. So you mentioned previously how Yamaha's higher-end receiver models let you store 2 different pattern settings so that you can have 2 different YPOW calibrations. Do the available differences between the 2 patterns include speaker distances? He was thinking he might like to have one setting pattern for a single seat closer to a screen when he was watching alone, and then a second setting pattern for when everyone is sitting together on their large couch.
There it is.
It's going to be a long night. Would Yamaha setup allow for that? You're going to have 2 full sets of speakers in here, one that's closer to you and one that's further away, or are you planning on moving the speakers?
He's planning on moving the seat. He can bring in a single chair so that he can sit closer.
Yeah, I mean, I would do that for sure.
It will, yeah. It's basically like, imagine you did a full here's my amplifier assignment, and you run YPOW, and you save that into setting pattern number 1, and then you did a whole new setup. So you could actually have changed out the speakers entirely, or now said that you have more or fewer speakers than the first setting pattern, or that the distances are different, the levels are different. You have a subwoofer versus not a subwoofer. All of these things, it's as though it's a completely new setup, but you get to save all of that as setting pattern number 2. So you can absolutely switch between 2 things exactly like you want.
Right.
Yeah, you totally can.
Oh. So how thick should side wall panels be? His speakers are about 2 feet from each side wall, but his left wall is really just a curtain that visually closes off the opening on his left. Could he make frames out of 1x4s and put regular 3.5-inch thick Roxol in them? Or should he make 6-inch thick panel? Well, 6-inch thick is awfully overkill, honestly. But
for regular sidewall panels, we don't typically go with panels that thick.
I wouldn't go anything thicker than 4 inches, and I mean, you can get away with less than that if you really want to.
You could. I mean, what is really nice is having, say, at least 2 inches of absorption with an air gap behind it. But if you, 1x4s are a perfect. I mean, it's such easy lumber to get a hold of. So it absolutely makes sense that you would go with 1x4s as your framing material, and then whatever insulation fits nicely into that will work totally fine. So no need to go thicker for your sidewall panels. Your sidewall panels are actually trying to be more of a spot treatment. They're not a put it anywhere and it helps. It's more of a we are catching a specific reflection with those, and we're worried about the mid-range and treble with that particular reflection.
Right. Yeah. So he already has 2 super chunk bass traps in his rear corners, and then he had a shelf in the middle of his back wall that is 15 inches deep and 24 inches wide. He used some more shelf panels to turn that into a 24-inch wide, 18-inch tall by 15-inch deep frame, and he filled it with insulation. Is 15 inches deep overkill? It does look a little strange with such a chunky box in the middle of his back wall. Should he make the actual part that's holding the insulation thinner front to back so it isn't quite so deep and chunky? I can't see it.
I mean, it's the very middle.
Black.
Yeah, if you see his couch there, right above the middle of his couch, there's a big black, long rectangle, wide rectangle, and that is, I mean, you can't tell from looking at it, but it's 15 inches deep. He actually has his older projector that he's not really using anymore standing on there, as well as his surround back speakers just standing on that 15-inch deep shelf. But then he's like, well, I got this shelf already. I'll just put in a framing below it and fill the whole thing with insulation. I mean, if you're okay with the way it is now, there's no real need for you to make it thinner. I mean, the thicker, the deeper the frequencies it will actively absorb. So,
right.
I mean, if it's bothering you in some way, then yeah, you can make it thinner. I mean, even the thicker bass traps that like GIK sells, they're about 8 inches deep. That's their monster GIK trap, which is about 6.5 inches of insulation and then a 1.5 inch air gap. So about 8 inches deep in total. And that's pretty effective to like just below 80 hertz, getting down to about 70 hertz or so. That's about as effective as most regular insulation can be. But the thicker it is, the deeper you go. And there's no reason acoustically to change it. So only if you really want to.
That's right. And I mean, there's, if you've already done it and it's not, I mean, if it's bothering you, sure. I mean, there's no reason not to, you can change it. I don't know if that's going to, you want to rerun your room correction once you do. But other than that, I don't think I would, worry much about it. So he put hockey pucks under his center speaker to angle them up a bit. What we recommend is a more permanent solution. Oralex used to make some sort of angling thing that I thought worked really well. But I imagine these days, since lately everything that Oralex used to make suddenly increased in price exponentially, it maybe isn't as the best solution or the most cost-effective one. But I remember really liking it, whatever it was.
Yeah, Oralex's were called the Mopads. That was the name that they gave to them. And it actually is still what I searched for on Amazon to see. Now, thankfully, there is now so much competition in foam decoupling things that their prices have come back down to be a bit more competitive, but they still sell their Mopads on Amazon for about $35 for a pair. Now, they actually come in 4 pieces, so the idea is if you have a wider speaker, you have 2 pieces that go under one speaker and 2 pieces that go under another. That way you can hold a center speaker with it or whatnot too. But there's one that's even cheaper that will do just as well. Let's see, what are these? What's the name brand here on these ones? They're $20 for, again, the same thing. Just the SM Pads is what they're called, and they're the exact same design as the Mopads, but for $20 instead of $35. And what's nice about these is they actually are like on an angled shape, but they have a second piece that goes into each of these, so you can make it flat, or you can make it a downward or upward angle, depending on which way you face it, or you can make it a even steeper downward or upward angle by turning the little foam piece that could make it flat. You turn that around, and now it makes an even steeper angle on it. So whatever angle you need, this is nice, stiff foam that it can hold 75 pounds, so it'll definitely hold your center speaker like 75 pounds without compressing. And that'll do the job.
All right. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
When those Mopads came out, they were literally the only thing on the market.
Yeah.
Or Oralex came out with them. Everybody's like, "Oh my god, this is the best idea ever! Why didn't we thought about this?" And then everybody's like, "I can make that for cheaper."
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, Gurinder says, "Is it a good idea for bass traps to have a reflective layer across their front face? GIK offers traps with a membrane and or diffusion scatter plate. Gurinder was thinking he could put a layer of plastic, literally a black garbage bag, across the front face of his insulation and behind the fabric. What do we think?" Don't do that. That's what I think.
Yeah, I would definitely not be doing it with just a garbage bag. The membrane thing that GIK does, I mean, it's certainly a thicker piece of plastic than just like a layer of a garbage bag.
Garbage bag is just gonna, like, vibrate. You're gonna hear it for sure.
Yeah, how effective that really? I've never been the biggest fan of. I mean, an actual tuned like Helmholtz resonator. That's one thing, tuned membrane trap that is really only effective at like one particular frequency and a very narrow band to either side. Just putting something like that over top of regular insulation, I'm not really the biggest fan of that, even coming from GIK. The scatter plate is different. That's a little bit different because now you're just combining diffusion and absorption. And if I mean, honestly, when it comes to diffusion in a room like yours, Gurinder, I'll always say that you really want to measure and you'll want to look at the time response. You want to look at the waterfall graphs. And if what you're seeing is unevenness in your mid-range and treble in terms of the decay times in your mid-range and treble, that's where diffusion will help you. So with measurements, you might be able to determine, I actually could use diffusion in this room. And the easiest place for me to put that is over top of the face of my existing panels. That makes a lot of sense, but don't do the garbage bag thing for sure.
No, I think the scatter plate thing is kind of an interesting thing because it's like semi-porous, right? So it's porous, so it allows like the bass waves to basically pass through it almost unimpeded, whereas the higher frequencies are scattered diffused out, which is an interesting idea. For me, I very rarely have I found from a sonic standpoint much of a benefit of diffusion. I mean, that's just from my ears. That's not from measurements whatsoever. But the times I have been in rooms that have had diffusion, I haven't necessarily thought, this is a better experience than I have had before. And I know, like in Gene de la Sala's home theater, he ended up removing it or moving it or did a bunch of stuff with it because he had a whole bunch of problems with it, with diffusion. So I think straight absorption is fine, and then if you want some diffusion, put a bookshelf someplace. So he's watching HDR movies on his JVC X790 projector. He's noticed that small bright objects like lights on the wall in the underground passage seem to smear and create sort of a lens flare type of effect that obscures other part of the image that are supposed to be in the foreground. Is that something physical, like lights reflections inside the light path of his projector, or is there some other way to reduce this?
Yeah, so specifically when it's HDR on the X790, the X790 was one of those earlier models that it is HDR capable, but it was kind of before JVC knew exactly what they were doing with HDR. And what you're describing sounds more like what happens when basically it's not tone mapping correctly. It's kind of blowing out those highlights.
Right.
This sounds more like a software problem than anything physical. I mean, if it were light reflections happening inside of your projector, you would notice that with SDR everywhere. Too. It would be all the time. It would be constant. It wouldn't just be HDR. So this sounds like it's a tone mapping issue. I would definitely refer you to JVC's own HDR specific settings because they basically said, out of the factory settings, things are like the first or second result. So that would be the first thing to address there. I know he's already using a Panasonic player, so it shouldn't really be a problem there, but it could be from, say, streaming sources would show this type of thing too. So there might be some adjustments to make to your JVC settings.
There you go. Jules. Last week we said Jules could pretty much use any amplifiers at all to power his 9 Google Chromecast audio dongles and 9 pairs of whole house audio speakers. We mentioned one option that would be to simply get 9 small Class D stereo amps, one for each Chromecast and pair of speakers. So any suggestions in the UK for that type of small stereo amp? I know that was just here, but I don't know there. So what do you got, Rob?
So I mean, I basically just did a Amazon UK search because I figure that should be widely available. There's a brand over there called Fosi, Fosi, and they have a lovely looking little 50 watts times 2 Class D amplifier. Looks perfectly reasonable. Looks like it has nice build quality. The reviews on it are all quite high. It's got a 4 and a more than half-star rating. 243 people have rated it over there on Amazon UK. So it goes for £56 and would totally be what you need. And 9 of those would be less expensive than a single 12-channel Dayton distribution amp over in the UK. So can't beat that. I guess
everybody's streaming onward right now because you keep going robot on me.
Oh, is that? I mean, my thing looks okay over here, so I'm not sure what the issue is.
I don't know. Or I told everybody to get off the internets, but my 16-year-old son is in high rebellion mode, but he's terrible at it. So his rebellion is to not do his homework, and they get mad when we yell at him about it.
Well, I've got a nice green light and 5,000 kilobits per second solid going on, so
I
it
don't
might
know if
be
it's
on
you.
your end.
I'd say it was you. It's probably on my end.
It might be.
Patrick would like a recommendation for a pair of inexpensive desktop speakers. He knows we always suggest Audio Engine, but with a starting price of about $200, those are more expensive than what he's looking to pay. He knows that Monoprice offers some desktop speaker models. Do we think those would be any good, or do we have something under $200 a pair, Mark, what we would recommend? Audio Engine on sale? I mean, sort of where I would go with this. But I mean, I would have no problems looking at Monoprice. I mean, you would have to take a really close look at the design and make sure that because Monoprice has a pretty wide selection of stuff.
Oh yeah.
But for $200, it's under $200. I mean, he's looking for under $200 for this pair.
Yeah,
it's kind of hard to get anything that's going to sound fantastic. I mean, you get something that's not adequate. It's about where you're going to end up at.
But there is something rather interesting because over at the Wirecutter, because I always like to look at what the Wirecutter recommends for things like these, because I've rarely been and if you look on Amazon, I think they're going for about $150 for a pair right now. So it's a 4 or 4.5 inch woofer in there and a 0.75 inch Silk Dome tweeter. And they like those quite a lot. But if you look over at Monoprice's DT4, so when you're looking at just the fronts, you go, well, those drivers look pretty similar and the dimensions are exactly the same and the drivers are described as being exactly the same, but some knobs are in a little bit different places. But then you look at the back of the Mackeys, the CR4s, and you look at sort of the panel layout there, and then you look at the back of Monoprice's DT4s, and man, that's more than a passing resemblance, one might say. Now, there is one key difference, which is that on the Mackie CR4s, they let you choose. So one of these speakers has the power plug, because these are powered monitors, and then the second speaker is a passive one that you connect to the first one with regular speaker wire. And on the Mackies, they have a little switch so you can choose if the powered one, the one that you plug into the wall, is the left speaker or the right speaker. And then, of course, the other one becomes the opposite. Whereas on the Monoprice DT4, they do not have that little switch. But these only have RCA and TRS inputs, so you could just switch your red and white wires.
Yeah, really.
You don't really need a hard button switch to do that. Now, the difference there is that you can get the Monoprice DT4s for, what is it, $76 right now for a pair of them?
It's a little bit cheaper.
Yeah, about half the price.
About half. I mean,
and
rounded down.
I'd kind of be a little bit shocked if they aren't essentially identical. I mean, Monoprice, we know straight up copied Energies Take 5s, and nothing would surprise me if they have the very same OEM as whoever is making Mackie's CR4s. So, you know what? I think those DT4s from Monoprice will be a pretty darn good choice and very affordable. And hey, they're so affordable, just send them on back if you don't like them.
All right, Joe. Joe has a Sony A9G OLED. Boy, I looked at that, and those letters and numbers together did not make any sense. A9G OLED. When there was a camera pan, or especially when there is text scrolling, he sees a stuttering in the movement, and that is bothering him. So Sony offers motion flow, and turning that up to high does get rid of the stutter, but then it adds blurring and distorted looking motion effect with motion flow on the end credits of a movie scroll up as smooth as can be, but with the movement of images during the actual movie look blurred and strange. With motion flow off, most of the movie looks fine, but then the end credits stutter as they scroll.
Yep.
It just sounds exactly like 2-3 pull down issues.
This is Judder. Judder.
Yeah.
Judder. Gudder. Yeah. Joe, that is what you are seeing is Judder. And it occurs because movies, other than Ang Lee's, are still shot at 24 frames per second. In fact, 23.976 frames per second is the exact number. And most streaming boxes, if you haven't set your Blu-ray player or your Ultra HD Blu-ray player to output 24 frames per second, then everything is being output at 60 frames per second, at least in North America. And 24 does not go evenly into 60. So when you try to show 24 frames at a refresh rate of 60, they have to do this alternating thing where you show one frame 3 times and then the next frame twice, and then the frame after that 3 times, and then the frame after that twice.
Or a 3-2 pull down.
Your 3-2 cadence, that's right. And that leads to this stuttering, herky-jerky little bit. And you particularly see it in a nice, slow, even pan or evenly scrolling text. That's where you notice it's like, well, 3 frames, 2 frames, 3 frames, 2 frames. That's not even. But what Motion Flow does from Sony, that's their particular name for what we call frame interpolation, where they say, well, we know we have 24 frames, but we're trying to make 60 out of them, or in the case of all of their displays, including their OLEDs, 120 frames, because their panels refresh 120 times a second. And 24 does fit into 120 evenly. But when the source is sending 60, and the source was like, originally it was 24, but the source is sending it out as 60. That gets into this.
It did the 3-2 pull
it
down.
It did the 3-2. The TV doesn't have a chance to just show each of those 24 frames 5 times each, because that would get you to 120. So it gets this 60 times a second signal coming from the source, but it was originally 24. And the Sony, when you turn on Motion Flow, goes, well, I'm going to look at each frame that's being sent to me, and I'm going to make up frames in between each of the frames that are being sent to me, because I'm going to take my best guess at what should have gone in between.
Right.
And when it's something like scrolling text, it does a great job. When it's something like sports that was shot at 30 or 60 frames a second, it does a great job. But with 24, you get this weird, everything looking too smooth look that we refer to as the soap opera effect, because it looks like a soap opera that was shot on a video camera now. If you want to see this in the most pristine form, go and watch Gemini Man, because that's the look. And you're going to notice that things look a little bit odd compared to movies. But yeah, that is what judder is. It's what frame interpolation and the soap opera. So
the solution is what? To go to his source and have it output 24 frames per second.
That really is the only thing. I'll let you go through the rest of his question, because this will help explain too, just to be clear.
So then there's Sony's Cinemotion setting with Auto 1, Auto 2, and Auto options. Auto 1, Auto 2, and Auto?
Yeah, that's what it's got.
All right. And Manuel says Auto 2 should preserve the look of the film, but none of these settings seem to make any difference when he's watching, and that's because the source is messing it up. So could we please explain how these Sony settings work, and how should they be set in order to deal with the annoying stuttering? Well, go on.
Yeah, so I just want to clear up for everybody that in Sony's case, what they call Cinemotion is only applied to interlaced sources. So that could still be your cable box. Your cable box might be outputting 1080i.
1080i.
A lot of them still do. And Cinemotion, so when you take something that was originally shot in 24 frames a second, but you're now sending it out as 60 interlaced frames, you get this crazy thing that goes on where you take each of the 24 original frames and you're dividing them into odd and even lines. You've now turned them into 48 interlaced fields. And you go, well, now how do I show 48 fields at a rate of 60 times a second? And what you actually do is show frame 1, frame 2, then frame 1 again, or field 1, field 2, then field 1 again. That was the original frame number 1. And then field 1, field 2 of frame number 2. And then field 1, field 2, field 1 again of frame number 3, and it's this 3-2 cadence again. That is called telecine, television cinema. It's telecine 3-2. So Cinemotion is there to get rid of that. When it's interlaced, it'll de-interlace things properly, but then it will just try to show everything at 120 frames again, 120 hertz again. So it can do a good job of that because it'll put the interlaced fields back together and then show each of the combined frames 5 times each and give you proper motion, but that'll only work on interlaced. So yeah, the only option when you're watching a progressive scan source like your Blu-ray or your Ultra HD Blu-ray or one of the streaming sources like Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever it is, the source itself has to be outputting 24 frames a second. So that's easy enough on your discs. But for your streaming services, like, golly, the Apple TV 4K is really the only one that does it right. And when I say right, I mean automatically. The NVIDIA Shield can do it, but you have to, at a minimum, manually press a button to activate frame rate conversion every time, or in the case of like Disney Plus, it doesn't work, so you'd have to manually go into the NVIDIA Shield settings and tell it to output 24 frames a second. But then even your menus show up in 24 frames a second, and they're hard to use that way. So the Apple TV 4K is the streaming device that does this properly because it automatically outputs the correct frame rate for you. Yeah, not as simple as it should be, but you're seeing it firsthand.
It's not the TV though.
It's not the TV. It's not the TV. And he said he settled on turning motion flow off and Cinemotion on to just regular auto. Those are the correct settings, Joe. That is how your TV should be set. Now it's up to switching your sources to do their jobs correctly.
So next time we get to a question that's going to take you a while to answer, you'll have to actually tell me because I'm not looking at you.
Okay.
But I'm going to go scour this house and figure out who's still using the internet because someone's doing it, because that's got to be what's going on here. Because I'm hardwired in. There's no reason there should be a stuttering.
I mean, it might be coming from where you know.
It could be coming from anywhere between apart. You and us. Yes, you and me. You and us. What?
The royal Tom.
The royal me. I do walk around in a cape now that I have my leprosy beard. Yeah. But all right, Ryan. Ryan asks, have we seen the home theater gurus on YouTube? To Ryan, it seems like most of their information is correct. Then they go off with some strange recommendations and explanations that have Ryan scratching his head and thinking, well, that's not right. Do you have an opinion on them? No, I don't watch anybody else. I don't even watch us. I don't watch anybody else. I don't watch Gene's videos. I don't read anything really. I mean, I do. I read articles, but I don't watch. I don't want to watch about home theater. I think about it all the time. I don't need to watch stuff. I'll read some articles here and there, but I'm certainly not going to hear somebody else talk about it, especially if I think as soon as somebody goes off on a tangent where I know they're going down the primrose path, the wrongness, I'm like, I'm out, and that's it. And not a single podcast out there, and probably my own would also qualify depending on when I listen to it compared to when it was recorded. There's been plenty of times I've been wrong too, so I wouldn't blame anybody for saying, "Oh, that Tom guy, he was wrong that one time," and I stopped listening. So, but yeah, no, not me.
As far I've seen a few, it's certainly not all of their videos, Ryan, but I've seen a few, and my assessment is pretty close to yours. By and large, their information is correct, but they do. Basically, they go down some exceedingly specific scenarios that really don't apply to the vast majority of cases, and it can be a benefit if you are the 1 out of 1,000 people that actually applies to. So I'm not mad about that, but at the same time, for someone who's looking for easy to understand advice, it could easily lead them astray because they might look at some of the information that they're saying and go like, okay, that's what they said, but it really only applies to some exceedingly specific scenarios. When it comes to like specific ways that they'll measure some base configurations or set up certain equalization patterns for multiple subs and that, it's like, yeah, I mean, what they're saying is not wrong. It's just only in very specific scenarios. So yeah, scratching your head and going, that doesn't sound right. That's not the same thing that Tom and Rob would say. We take the sometimes opposite approach. I mean, if someone asks us for something very specific, we will get very specific. I'm sure you've heard us do that if you've been listening for any length of time. But we try to keep our answers as applicable to as many people as possible because we think that'll help the most people, basically.
Right. But on top of that, though, I mean, when we give very specific answers to very specific questions, a lot of times what I hope that our listeners are doing is they're applying that knowledge or our information based in that context. So they're hearing it and saying, okay, I don't have that kind of room, so this doesn't really apply to me, but it's interesting that could be the solution in a room that's not my room.
Yeah.
Because that's the difference. We don't with some exceptions, we very rarely say this is the solution. This is it. This is the right way to do it, and that's it. How to position subs in the rectangular room, we have the solution. We know where to do with that. Where about where to put your couch, we got some good ideas on that. Kind of where to put your room treatments, we've got some good ideas on that. But there's so many variables that go into this, and if you're listening to this, you should be saying to yourself, okay, how does this apply to my room? Doesn't apply to my room. okay, so how does this apply to my friend's room? Oh, it does apply to my friend's room. So next time I'm in there, I can look around and say, oh, that's why I'm hearing what I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm.
So that sort of thing. He asked, what's a good SPL meter to buy from Amazon these days? That's a good idea because, people like me and Rob, we've been doing this so long. We bought our SPL meters from Radio Shack back when Radio Shack was still a thing.
Yep.
And, well, hey, yeah, and people are like, oh, I wouldn't have spent. Can I get one from under $20? Let me tell you something about SPL meters. As far as I can tell, they don't ever break. They just, mine's older than my children. And it still works. Okay, I don't even remember last time I changed a battery, I only had 2 kids. Okay, so if it costs a little bit more, just say to yourself, I will die with this thing. Is it worth the extra $20? Because that's probably what's going to happen. I mean, just keep it inside and you'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm going to go through 3 of them. None of them are over $60, so I don't think that's unreasonable for a tool that you can definitely use and probably bequeath to your children.
That's right.
So I'll start with the cheapest and the smallest and probably the most easily read and used, which is Triplets Sonacheck. Very simple, nice, big digital readout right on it. Now, what's important there is that it can be set to C weighting, which is definitely what you want when you're trying to use it to set your speaker levels. But it's like basically pocketable, nigh indestructible, very easy to read and use, and only costs $47. Now, if you want something that is objectively a little bit more accurate, as in its tolerance is going to be, tighter tolerance on it, there's the $60 Galaxy Audio Checkmate 130. You'll see these all over the place. A lot of videos you'll see people using this model of SPL meter. It's only $60, completely not unreasonable. And basically every unit tested against each other are accurate within about plus or minus 2 dB. So it's quite an accurate SPL meter. Pretty good. Never going to have problems if you go that way. But I will say there's sort of a new one that I think might be the best choice of all now. This is the BAFX. What is the actual number on here? The 3608. So it's probably the least memorable of the numbers, but it's the BAFX 3608. On Amazon, it's going for $58. What I like about this one is it's the only one with a USB output that you can connect directly to your computer. So if you want to use it for anything computer, and it actually comes with its own software that lets you measure and track and put everything into a spreadsheet and analyze your readings and stuff like that. And given that it's actually $2 cheaper than the CM130, and according to reviews of it, very, very accurate and dependable, I like that one. Yeah.
All right, there you go. Nick is remodeling his basement and has been working with Ted White from Soundproofing Company to make sure the construction is planned out in detail. Once Nick's plans are finalized, Ted will provide detailed instructions for Nick's contractors so that the final room lives up to Nick's soundproofing needs. Mm-hmm. Nick's primary seat will be 10 feet away from his motorized screen. Behind the screen, his 77-inch OLED will be mounted on an articulated mount so that the projection screen can roll up and the OLED can be brought forward for a larger field of view when in use. You'll have a single row of seats, 3 love seats going across. This is a basement, and finishing the floor and soundproofing the ceiling result in most of the ceiling height being 7'4". Mm-hmm. But a short distance behind Nick's row of seats, the ceiling is only 6'9" because of a soffit that will cover some duct work. So yeah, all right. The room is not. I mean, it's square.
It's slightly wider than it is long at the end of things, but only slightly. Yeah, it's pretty close to square.
3 love seats that are not on the back wall, but just behind, about a third of the way in from the back wall, maybe a little bit more than that, but not so bad. And it's got a drop screen and the motorized drop screen, and then a smaller 77-inch that will pull out. Mm-hmm. Okay, closet hiding support poles, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? All right, he's pretty much set on getting a JVC NX7 with its generous zoom range. It can go right at the back of his room, but his low ceiling height at the back. But with his low ceiling height at the back, does it still make sense to use a ceiling mount? What would actually allow him to mount the projector as high as possible to give it the most head clearance, in this case, a ceiling mount or a shelf on the back wall? Where are the vents on this thing? Are they on the top?
They're not on the top. It exhausts out the front, and it pulls air from the bottom and the sides and the back, but not the top.
I mean, a shelf. A shelf would probably be the best. I mean, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, because there are basically flush ceiling mounts for projectors, but then it would be going on your soffit, and very often soffits are not constructed, as sturdily as regular walls are. But by the same token, the NX7 is a big, heavy projector. The shelf that it would go on would need to be a well-reinforced shelf, not just a couple of L brackets and a piece of MDF that you buy from Home Depot. This would need to be a properly constructed heavy shelf, and you would want it to be deep enough that it would allow for room at the back of the projector so that air can come in through those back vents as well. Yeah, I mean, it's a good question because it ends up having to be a heck of a shelf, honestly, for a JVC NX7. It's not inconsequential at all. Whereas if you do just go for a flush ceiling mount, I mean, the as far as getting the ventilation and that, it might be easier. You just have to make sure that the soffit you're attaching it to now is sturdy enough to hold all that weight. Yeah. I don't know. Can you give a concrete answer? I'm almost in favor of going for the flush ceiling mount and making sure that soffit is just really, really well beefed up constructed, because the shelf you have to make.
How wide is the soffit?
Like deep?
How deep?
I'm not exact. I think it's about 2.5 feet. I mean, you can mount it towards.
Could you put it in front of the soffit?
No, you wouldn't. Throw distance? You wouldn't get enough throw distance at that point. Yeah. So it does. I mean, because the thing is, where the flush ceiling mount is connected to the soffit could be right at the front of the soffit. So the actual lens of the projector could be a little bit in front of the soffit, but you can't put the entire body and the room that it needs behind it, all of it in front of the soffit. That won't work. Plus, it would be right over his head at that point.
Well, I mean, at 6'9", though, in the back, underneath that soffit, I mean, you're going to bump your head into it. I mean, I'm not going to. I'm 5'7", and you're not going to because you're also 5'7".
That's right.
So, but there is somebody who's going to bump their head into that thing
if you're walking right beneath it. Yeah.
Yeah. This is a non-opt. I mean, I almost want to say move your seats a little bit forward and just use the flat panel, and but he's not going to be for that. I understand.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just say I'm almost in favor of going with the flush ceiling mount. Just make sure your soffit's beefed up. But if you do go with the shelf, it's fine. You don't need to really worry about having space above the top of the projector when it's sitting on a shelf, but that shelf has to be really beefed up. So either way, we're saying whatever this projector is attached to, you got to beef it up because it's a big, heavy projector.
It might be 6 of one, half dozen another.
It kind of is. Yeah.
I think if you made that shelf just as tight as you could to the top of the ceiling, you're going to, or to the top of the soffit, you're going to end up with it being a couple, maybe inch or two, but you add in the shelf, and
and it's
the same. There's the same.
Almost harder to get at when it's on the shelf because you got to kind of like scooch it out. Whereas if it's attached to a ceiling mount, then it's accessible.
Yeah, but how many times do you access your?
Every time you clean the filter.
Yeah, which you won't need to move anything to do that. So that's fine. Yeah. All right, he isn't 100% dedicated on his choice of screen material, and although he's leaning towards Seymour AV's Center Stage XD, he was thinking he might request samples from Seymour AV and then decide based on those. But of course, he would need to have his projector on hand. With the pandemic going on, it isn't exactly easy to hire contractors these days. So would it even make sense to try and use a projector before the room is completed? Everything is white walls and white ceiling right now, and no one can really say how long it will be before things get more or less back to normal and his renovation can resume. So do we have any strong opinions about which screen material he should buy, and how badly would an NX7's image be compromised in his currently unfinished white room? Dude, I'm honestly always in favor. If you're like, well, it's just not the perfect room right now, but I'm just gonna go with it for a little bit until I can get my good stuff. Dude, when you get your good stuff, you're gonna be like, oh my God, I'm so glad I spent this money. You know what I mean? That to me is money well spent. When you're like, you want to project on the white wall for a while? Yeah, we'll project on the white wall for a while. They'll be fine. It's what you have for right now. But then, just know that when you put your screen, the screen in front of it, as long as it's the same you're not changing the size of the perceived image, the amount of degrees of field of view you have, it'll look exactly the same. But if you change it so it's a little bit smaller now, they'll be like, oh my God, I can't believe I got this small screen.
At the same time, though, he already has a 77-inch OLED already on an articulating mount, which I will grant you, it does not give you the same field of view that you would have with your projector, but it's not like you're suffering watching a 77-inch OLED that's been brought towards you to make your field of view larger. The reason I bring that up is because the NX7 is only going to get less expensive as time goes on.
That's true.
And we don't know, we talked about this before, we don't know if JVC is going to release new projectors at the end of 2020 or if new ones won't come out until the end of 2021. We don't know. But regardless, the NX7 is not going to get more expensive at this point. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you won't get the very best performance out of it with white walls and a white ceiling. Will it be watchable on a normal white screen with the lights off? Yeah, totally watchable. But it will not be the very best. Once you have your room blacked out, it will look even better. If you were to put an NX5 and an NX7 next to each other in your room, you wouldn't be able to tell the differences in black. Whereas with the room blacked out, you might notice that the NX7 gets even blacker. But your room right now with the white walls would be enough to wash that out. You wouldn't see that difference right this minute, but still totally watchable. I will say on the screen choice, when your seats are 10 feet away, I would lean towards Seymour's Ultrafine as opposed to the regular Center Stage XD. The regular Center Stage XD, you can see the pattern of the weave. I would say you need to be about 11, 12 feet to me is comfortable. If you're 12 feet away, go XD all the way. Absolutely. But 10 feet, I would lean towards the Ultrafine. But I like your idea of getting samples first.
I feel like screen material is something that you can sight unseen shop for. You know, you could just kind of read the reviews.
Actually, yeah, even without a projector, you just get the samples and you'll be able to see, like, oh, I can see the weave from 10 feet away. Right. I guess I'll go with the Ultrafine. Like, yeah, you don't even need a projector for that.
Yeah. So he's planned out exactly where he wants his front, left, center, and right speakers to go, as well as his side surrounds. And he definitely wants Atmos. And would like to be able to label his 4 ceiling speakers as front heights and front rear, so they will perform their best with all the immersive audio formats. To that end, he worked out the positions on a ceiling that would place them at 45-degree elevation angles. But because the ceiling, the back of his room is only 6'9", they will end up being close to the back wall and relatively low. Does it still make sense to keep surround back speakers? No, since he only has one row of seats. Wait, did I already answer the question? I'm still reading. Surround backs do not have to be up that high to provide a clear line of sight to all the seats. No, but they're still fairly close to where 45-degree rear heights would go. Or does he move the rear heights forward to provide more separation for the surround backs? No. But then they're no longer within the angle where rear heights are supposed to go. Could he still label them rear heights anyways and have it function well? He's thinking that with the room undergoing full construction, he would pre-wire for 6 overhead speakers as well as front wides, even if he never ends up using those. So what would we suggest for his very best speaker layout? 5.1.6. That's what I would wire for.
Or including front wides, it ends up being 7.4 in his case.
Front wides. Is he doing front wides too?
Oh, he's going to wire for them. Which
That's
I'm all
fine,
in favor.
whatever.
I mean, it's a few extra leads of speaker wire when the walls are down. Absolutely. I'm totally in favor of that. And I will always say I'm okay with front wides. So, okay.
It's a complete waste of speaker wire, but knock yourself out.
That's really not that much. Yeah, so I mean, this is Tom and my classic difference of opinion, because I think surround backs can still be nice. If you're the type of person who enjoys such things, if you already know that you like surround backs, I'm not going to tell you that you must get rid of them. And I actually will say, even so, when you look at this in the diagram, right, in terms of how far apart he's labeled them as TR for top rear, but where his rear heights would go compared to his surround backs, front to back distance wise, yeah, they're really close. But you do have, if you had 2 rows of seats and you had to mount your surround backs fairly high, I'd be like, yeah, you're completely into redundant territory. But you can have your surround backs not that high. I think you're actually okay with your current plan. Tom will tell you just get rid of your surround backs. Whoever you prefer the opinion of, It's going to be all right.
I'm right.
It's going to be all right.
Rob gets to be right all the time. I tell Rob he's right all the time. He is dead wrong here. It is. Right. I am telling you, this is wrong. Surround backs are the least important speaker in your entire arsenal, especially if you're going to have overheads. I mean, it'll be fine. You'll never.
I will definitely tell you, if you got rid of the surround backs, the chances of you actually outright missing them are really, really low. But I wouldn't actually move your rear heights. They are where they should be. Keep those there.
Yeah. So all of his gear will go in an equipment rack in the adjacent closet. Nick is trying to work out what his electrical needs will be. He wants an outlet up high for his projector at the back of the room, plus an outlet for his OLED at the front of the room, plus power for his motorized screen. He wants 4 subwoofers, 1 at each corner. So outlets for all of those, plus whatever outlets would be typical along each of the walls. As far as the gear in his rack goes, he'll have his in receiver, his 5-channel outlaw amp, and several source devices, including game consoles. So how many outlets should he request to have wired in on independent circuits in that equipment closet, and how many independent circuits do we think are needed within the room itself? Independent circuits? I mean, okay. So the reason to have independent circuits is that if the gear is interacting with each other in such a way that it causes like hums and buzzing and stuff like that. That's my understanding. I'm no electrician,
but
so
also you can reach full electrical load, because I mean, of course, you can have multiple outlets attached to one circuit breaker.
Right. Well, first of all, let's talk about a couple of things. First of all, you didn't say anything about battery backup in here. And
I know.
There's already an issue right there.
That's the main thing.
Second of all, you don't want an independent outlet for your projector up high. You want an outlet that goes from your projector back down to your equipment rack.
That's
with
right.
a female or male or whatever it's called.
Yeah, male inlet inside of your equipment closet. So you'd have a male inlet in your closet that is connected to via regular Romex inside your walls and through that soffit where the projector is going to end up to a regular female outlet by your projector. But you've essentially just created an in-wall extension cord. That's really all we're talking about, so that you can plug your projector into a battery backup unit that exists in your equipment closet.
I mean, I would also think about doing that for that motorized screen too.
Exactly.
The motorized screen, one of the easiest ways to control it is, when you power on your projector, it also powers on the motorized screen, and that tells it, like a 12-volt trigger, basically tells it to lower. That way there's no IR controls, there's nothing. It's just if the projector goes on, the outlet that's a slave to that outlet then also goes on. And APC units can do stuff like that.
Yep.
You can program them to do stuff like that. So that makes it so that when if I say Harmony, turn on my my projector, the screen comes down automatically. You don't have to have a separate command for it or anything. And the projector goes off, the screen goes up. That's all there is to it. It's as simple as that. So I would do it for both of them to be sure. Now, if you want to have independent outlet circuits for each one of your subwoofers, that's fine. I still think 4 subs is way too much in this room. I mean, how big is this room?
It's not that big, but I mean, 1 in each corner. That's going to be real nice, even bass. So I got no beef with that.
Other than that, I mean, I guess you could put 2 independent circuits in your
equipment closet.
One for your amp and one for everything else, including your receiver.
Pretty close, yeah. I mean, you'd want your outlaw amp, and I guess maybe you probably could put your receiver and your outlaw amp. The outlaw amp isn't crazy, so you could put your outlaw amp and your receiver on one outlet, and then basically everything else, sources, projector, and that on a second one. If you want to go nuts because you're like, oh, maybe the motor in the screen will create some noise or something, I mean, you could have a third outlet for that. Yeah, I mean,
if you want it to be controlled by your APC, you can.
That's true. Yeah, it would be connected.
The
to the
APC
same as the
should
projector.
get rid of any noise that would be in there anyway.
That's also true. Yeah, but I mean, I would like to have, so at the back of your room for your projector, I would want to have an in-wall extension that goes to a male inlet that's in your closet, and at the front of your room for your OLED and your motorized screen, I would want to have another in-wall extension that goes to a second male inlet in your equipment closet. So I'm not worried about putting outlets at the front of your room for your screen and your OLED, although you'll probably still have a regular outlet on the front wall, but it'll be down low, not up high. I want you to have the up high outlet leading to a male inlet inside your closet. And yeah, you need 2 dedicated outlets inside of your equipment closet, but you don't need more than that.
I don't think so. So Seymour AV also sells JVC projectors, and their price is one of the lowest as long as you are also buying a screen from them at the same time. They offer a $250 projector calibration, saying they'll calibrate your JVC projector to the screen you buy from them before they ship it out. It was Nick's understanding that with a projector, the room has a large influence on the final calibration. So does it make any sense to pay $250 for this pre-calibration? No.
I mean, what they can give you is accurate color for whatever small amount of color shift there is imbued by their screen. Now, it's really small because Seymour screens are really color neutral, but not perfect color neutral. So they can get the color accuracy spot on, but you would still need to then set the contrast and brightness, your lamp level, all of that, because that is very much room dependent. Then if you really want to get nitty gritty, if you do have non-neutral walls, then yeah, the color that you perceive can be thrown off a little bit. However, the color that is measured coming off the screen is the result of basically the direct light path from the projector to the screen. So what they can do at their factory before they send it to you is give you color accuracy, but not contrast, brightness, light level accuracy. You'd still need to do that for yourself. It's kind of tough for me to say that that's really, really worth it. The NX7 out of the box is a very accurate projector right away, and their screens have almost no color shift to them. So as much as I would like to say I'm willing to send Seymour more money because they're a good company, it's tough for me to justify in this case. If you were getting a projector that's really color and accurate out of the box, which is kind of rare these days, but if you had that, then maybe it could be worth it for sure to get good color accuracy, because setting the contrast and brightness yourself isn't that difficult. In this case, I'd probably say no.
So when the renovation is eventually finished, Nick plans to make this dedicated theater pretty dark, quote unquote. He's okay with black and or dark gray paint and or carpet for some of the room, but he doesn't want the entire room to be black and gray. He envisions using a couple different shades of brown in crucial places where aesthetics are a priority. So are there specific areas of the room where it's important to use black or dark gray? He thought we previously mentioned the front wall and the ceiling, but he wasn't sure. I cannot endorse painting your ceiling black. I am sorry. I can't do it. I can't do it. Now, I am in favor of you painting dark gray or black if you really want to go black. I think it's a terrible idea, but a gray or dark gray front wall. Okay. I can get behind that. But I feel like the rest of it is sort of whatever you want it to be. You want it to be brown. You want it to be, light gray. You want it to be other colors. I don't really care. My theater is orange, and that it's just the color it is. It was a color when it got it in here, and it's orange. And I mean, I'm sure it makes a difference in the absolute, color that I'm observing within this room, and I absolutely don't notice it and don't care, not one iota. Because when it's black in here, and the ceiling is white and the carpet is brown or something. I don't know. It's dirty colored right now. So yeah, if you want to go whole hog, you paint the whole room black.
Yes.
Is what you do. I mean, floor to ceiling, carpet, the carpet's velvet, the walls are velvet, everything's velvet, but in reality, a dark gray front wall, and then just try to not do, rainbow colors all over the place, and you'll be fine.
I mean, every move away from flat non-reflective black or outright Fidelio velvet that practically absorbs light, every move away from that is a slight hit to the ultimate contrast that this projector can. Because remember, whatever you look at your screen, that is as black can possibly be. It can only be brighter than that. There's no making it blacker than when you just have everything off and you're looking at the screen. That's as black as it can possibly be. And then as soon as the projector is on, every surface that can reflect some light back onto the screen, it will. A small amount, whatever it is. So really the most crucial thing for you to do is for all of the things that are not black or really dark gray, and including the black and the really dark gray, just don't make them glossy, right? Get it as close to a matte or a flat. Hey, that bare paint with its more durable finish that's essentially matte, but it's scuff resistant. That might be a good option here. Try to get away from much gloss as you can. Other than that, I mean, there's the idea of maybe having a shadow box around your screen, which is basically the first 3 to 4 feet of your ceiling, closest to your screen, the first 3 to 4 feet along each wall on your floor, having all of that be black. Some people subscribe to that. It honestly, due to the angles of your projector being all the way at the back of your room, that's not really where most of the reflected light is ultimately going to come from, from that shadow box area. So I'm not super saying that that's important. Just try to make it not glossy.
I mean, when it comes down to it, you look in my room, I've got this orange paint everywhere, but then I've got black room treatments pretty much covering every wall, and there's lots of light absorptive stuff kind of floating around in here. I mean, it's not going to be perfect, but to me, home theater, it can't be all about the fidelity. I'm sorry, it just can't be. You can't walk into a room and say, and it's an anechoic chamber that's got that crazy $100 per square inch black, absorbs all light, can't even see it, paint everywhere, and you have to sit in one spot with your head in the vise in order to get the exact perfect sound. That's not fun,
right?
That's not enjoyable, and it's not pleasant. It's not even really pleasant to be in an anechoic chamber. If you've ever been in one, it is not a place you want to be. So yes, you could put 6 feet of absorption on every wall, and sit in one little chair in the center of it, viewing through your view box, with your eyelids painted black so that you didn't reflect anything off of your face. That's right. And eye drops or some sort of special the
demon contact lenses from Supernatural.
Contact lenses where you're completely black.
That's right.
And then yes, this is as good as it could possibly be.
That's true.
Just be reasonable, but at the same time, at some point you're gonna walk in this room and go, "Oh my God, it's like a dungeon in here." What are people gonna think? You want people to look at your theater and say, "Well, I'd like to spend some more time in there," not, "Oh my God, there must be a box of toys in here." And I say toys with air quotes on them. So, yeah. Be reasonable. Sure, is what I'm going to say.
I just wanted to say one last thing real quick. In the plan that he showed, he's done the alternating diffuser, absorber, and he's done it where on the left side of the wall, if it's an absorber on the left side, then on the right side of the wall, directly across from it is a diffuser. I know that there are some acoustic experts who subscribe to that advice. I am not one of them. That the sound bouncing around your room is not bouncing perpendicular and parallel to itself across the room. It's coming from your speakers and going at angles. I subscribe more to, if you have absorption panel on the left side of your room or directly across of it, to have an absorption panel on the right side of your room, as long as your walls are symmetrical. That's the way that I don't want uneven reflections from my left and right side of the room. That doesn't make sense to me, and they're coming at angles off of you. I would also say I wouldn't go for just diffusion panels. In a room this size, you can basically never have too much absorption as far as your lower mid-range and upper bass is concerned. So I like having diffusion in here, but I would go with GIK scatter plates. Everything he has in here is from GIK. I would go with their scatter plates and put it on top of absorption and have 2 birds with 1 stone. It gives you more absorption, which is pretty much always a good thing in a room this size.
Not your first reflection point next to your speakers.
Right.
Just have a regular absorber there. Justin asks, what's our take on Andrew Robinson's opinion piece in the Home Theater Review? The next frontier in AV is the use. I did not get to this email, so I don't know. Article is that what used to drive sales and user brand loyalty were the traditional bigger, better, faster specs and having the best performance and functionality. But now that we've reached displays that can basically show us everything the eye can see, and audio equipment that can deliver everything the ear can hear, now it's going to be more about how easy it is to engage with products. And the author thinks that there's a lot of room for growth there. Not only would improved user interfaces allow people to more easily set up and use products, it might also allow them to get the best available performance out of them, while today's clunky UIs and menus are leaving potential on the table since users don't really know how to access it and there isn't much help for them within the products themselves. He points out how major brands are adopting UIs made by third parties, like how Sony's TVs use Android and TCLs use Roku. So what do we think? Do we agree that the next battleground for AV products are their softwares, menus, and UIs, or will people always be drawn to more pixels and higher watts? Well, I mean, one of the things that we're seeing more and more of is just the integration of "She Who Shall Not Be Named" and
and Google
Siri and the
Assistant
Google
is in there
Assistant
too. Yeah,
and all that stuff. This is what is driving that. People, and the reality here is you don't know what you don't know. And most people, at least in the world of AV, have no idea what they don't know. All they know is that they cannot hear the voices. So what do? They turn it up louder, right? And they're like, I still can't understand what's being said on this stupid TV. So it's the TV's fault. So they buy a new TV. Well, I still can't understand what's happening on this stupid TV. So they buy a sound bar, and the sound bar is, to the side of their entertainment cabinet or whatever, because it doesn't fit inside of it. So they put it to the side. Like, I still can't understand what's happening on this stupid TV. So they don't know what they don't know, and that's part of it for sure. I mean, we're going to see more and more integration with that sort of thing as a user interface. But education, as far as making it easy for people to understand what's going on, we're already seeing it I mean, if you think about UIs as far as interfaces with TVs, receivers, and everything else, they are infinitely better than they used to be. TVs in particular allow just don't put it in dynamic mode and it looks good. I mean, it used to be so much harder than that. It used to be so much more work than that to try to get a good image out of your TV. It used to be so hard to just to calibrate your speakers, just to get them all at the same volume level. We're not talking about room correction. We're talking about, I want all speakers to be coming at me at the same sound. I used to have people tell me, oh yeah, I can calibrate subwoofers by ear.
Yeah.
No, you can't. No, you can't. Shut up. No, you can't. Oh yeah, I can get within 1 or 2 dBs. You don't even own the SPL. How would you know? How would you even know? But that is part of that. So the UI that you don't have to actually interface is the best UI that exists. And that's what these voice assistants are really trying to get us to. And better products coming out of the box. I mean, using Odyssey for Denon is so foolproof, except that their graphics are wrong as far as where you place the microphone. But the rest of it's just like, if you plug the microphone in, the receiver turns on, you get an image on your screen that says, oh, you've got this going on. Okay, well, put the microphone here and let me walk you through this. And it's really not that
And the
hard.
whole setup wizard that Denon and Marantz have there is right. I mean, actually, it's good. I'm in favor of using that thing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of rare. But I can't say that I think companies coming up with their own UI is going to be a selling point, because you would only buy something because of that if you have experienced it. And even though people do still like to go to a store and see something and then probably buy it online, and they don't give that store any benefit for having shown it to them, very few people are actually digging through the menus when they go to a store. They're just, how is it set up in the store? They're looking at it, and that's how they make their decisions. So I think the conceit that the UI is somehow going to be where companies can differentiate themselves, and that's going to be a selling point. I don't really think that's the case, because people would only know about that if they use it. Now, what does make sense is getting more standardized and shared UIs. And this idea of going to third parties to do that makes sense, because if people go, well, I use an Android phone and now my TV kind of works like my phone, that makes more sense. They don't have to experience that somewhere first to get it. They just say, oh, it works like my phone does. I mean, Roku, to their credit, they've simplified things and they're spreading out. But and like you're saying with the voice assistants, again, people sometimes already have that in their house and like, oh, well, now I can just tell it to turn on my TV. Again, it's because they're already used to it. So I don't think companies putting time and effort and money into their own proprietary UI versus better and better specs is really going to be a selling point. But if we have more standardized and shared UIs, that could make more sense.
Well, the person who's making the case that companies making their own UIs are the ones that are going to be on top are clearly fans of Apple. I mean, because that's what they have done. They've created, and I don't mean that in a bad way. That's not negative. There's no negative connotation there. This is one of the selling points for a lot of people. Like once you start, That once the Android, Samsung owner says my phone is on every spec more powerful than your iPhone, 5 days before the iPhone comes out and they're in line to buy it, they're like, yes, but the interface is just so much better. That's what they say. That's the fallback argument for why my camera's better or this is better. No, the UI is better. The interface is better. And yes, Apple has done a lot of work on making sure that they have a UI that's very unique. They have an infrastructure in a playground or a sandbox that's their own, and nothing else works exactly like it. And once you get used to it, it's very hard to move away from it. And that's part of the draw of Apple, and that's also part of what keeps people coming back to them. Will all companies do that? I think it's a waste of money. I think it's a huge waste of money when instead you could just say, oh, Google, can I use your UI? Oh, yeah. Sure. Just put our name on it someplace and pay us $50 million. Yeah, no problem. Got that under the couch. So, but I don't ever think we're going to get away from raw specs either. Yeah,
that's going to keep going.
It's just, we're just too used to saying, that mine's better than yours, and it's better objectively because of these measurements.
Well, I also think form factor is what really sells for people, because when we start getting modular displays that you can make any size that you want on your wall and add to it later to make it bigger, that's going to sell, and it's not going to matter what the UI is. People are going to buy it.
Right. Yeah, and foldable phones are now starting to come out. I've already seen some of that. That's going to sell because it's new and different.
It's different.
People are going to be excited about it. When the gold Apple phone with the first gold one came out, everybody's like, "Oh my god, I got to have a gold one." Whatever. Carl on Twitter. Carl says, "Where can we get Atmos test tones to play through each Atmos speaker position one at a time?" Every receiver that you connect it to, just go through the test tone.
But that doesn't tell you if your source device is sending it properly.
That's true, but I mean, but then if your source device is an Apple TV 4K, you're not going to be able to get something on there anyways.
Well, that's what Carl was hoping for. Now, Dolby on their own website and their professional section, they used to have test tones that you could actually load onto a USB stick, so you could play it directly through an AV receiver through its USB port, or some streaming devices that have USB inputs. You could actually play it that way. Unfortunately, they've taken those off of their website. I don't really know why, but they have. So there were the Dolby Atmos demo discs, Blu-ray specifically, because they have an Ultra HD Blu-ray now, which is kind of the easiest one to get, but they didn't put the individual test tone tracks onto the Ultra HD Blu-ray version. They were on the Blu-rays from 2016 onward, and they only went through 2018 as far as I know, the regular Blu-rays. So I'm actually thinking what I might do, since I have one of those and I can just turn each of those individual test tone tracks into an MKV. I might try to host that somewhere and put a link for that so that people can get it. Now, you would need to have something that can play MKV files or convert it into a file type. Well, actually, no, you couldn't even use something like Handbrake, because then the Atmos audio might disappear. So you need something that can play MKVs. But yeah, I mean, that could just be Plex on any streaming device, or it should be able to play on your Ultra HD Blu-ray player. So yeah, I might try to host that myself. I'll put the link if I do.
There you go. All right. Tom, not me, different Tom. Tom says he appreciates our answers last week regarding using bookshelf speakers in a large volume in air and how that relates to the frequency range just above where the speakers and the subwoofer crossover. He says he is certainly willing to raise the crossover if that's all that's needed, but he's still hoping to clarify things a bit further. Dude, if you buy tower speakers, just buy tower speakers.
That's not quite it.
I'm just joking.
I'm just joking.
I don't know. I haven't read the rest of this question yet. Let's go. All right, here we go. Basically, if there is an objective, measurable way to see how low a pair of bookshelf speakers can play in a given room size, or if it's large. In his case, he has Room EQ Wizard and the measurement mic, and he was able to use that to send bookshelf speakers in his SVS PC13 Ultra sub to get a very nice blend that has good bass response at his seat using a mini DSP. But of course, all that was done with sweeps playing at about 75 dB and definitely never louder than 85. We discussed with another listener, Damien, How you don't want to run test sweeps with Room EQ's Wizard at 0 dB full scale. Damien himself described how the measurement microphone started clipping in its readings, with the test tones playing that loud, plus the receiver at full reference volume. So how can Tom, him, not me, see or test more objectively whether his bookshelf speakers can honestly keep up down at 80 to 160 hertz? I don't know.
Well, so
I mean, if they're playing at 75 and you're 75 dB and you're not like maxing your volume dial to get there, I mean, it should be fine. I mean, I don't really know what else to say.
Well, you basically can
there's headroom.
Extrapolate, because if you take a reading at, like, start your reading at 65 dB, do another at 75, do another at 85, and all of those are fine. Your mic won't clip, and Room EQ Wizard can output that totally fine. So if you do those 3 readings, and if you're not seeing any change in the downward slope at the bottom end of your bookshelf speakers, then you're getting a pretty good idea that at least up to 85 dB, they're not starting to compress or anything like that. You can also look at what equalization needs to be done in order to get the low end of your speakers to blend with your subwoofer at, say an 80 hertz crossover. And if you're seeing that the equalization is having to boost in that low end, well, then you know that the speaker actually is within this volume of air rolling off down towards that bottom end and having to be boosted up by the equalizer.
So you have to use your Odyssey editor app to do that?
You could do that if you don't. I mean, in his case with Room EQ Wizard, he can just run the 3 different sweeps and see what the response of his speakers are. And you can sort of extrapolate. Now, of course, as you go up and up and up, you're going to start compressing more and more and more. But if you're basically seeing that it's that curve is staying the exact same shape going up, then it's going to remain at that same shape up to the power handling limits of the speaker. It's not as though the speaker starts to have crazy frequency response. It will beyond its power handling rating, right? So with the Ascend speakers that are rated up to about 300 watts, they're, have high power handling in that, you can keep going up to that power level and that response will remain pretty darn close to the same. It'll start compressing towards the top end of that. So yeah, you can basically do a little bit of extrapolation there with that. The other alternative would be to get a higher end microphone that can simply measure up to 120 or 130 decibels. You get one of those Earthworks mics or something like that, which is like what Josh Ritchie uses over at Database to measure his subwoofers that play up to like 140 dB. But then you're spending several $100 to $1,000 on your microphone. But yeah,
or you could just take our word for it.
You can more or less extrapolate, yeah, with reasonable level test tones and seeing what your equalizer has to do down there.
So Dolby recommends that your front, left, and right speakers be positioned at plus or minus 22.5 to 30 degrees to the left and right of straight ahead center, so a 45 to 60 degree spread. For their part, THX has always recommended a 45 degree spread for home setups. So what are the pros and cons of increasing or decreasing this angle? Do either of us have a strong preference for a particular angle, and if so, why? It is so speaker dependent. It's almost impossible to answer this question. I don't like having speakers super wide, generally speaking, but then again, a lot of times that's just the way they have to be. But many speakers, like Atlantic Technology comes to mind, and those were developed by what's his name?
Atlantic Technology. That was
oh my god, it's just fallen out of my head completely. His like you could always point him straight forward because his off-axis response.
Vance Dickinson? Did he do Atlantic?
I think it might be. Okay, I don't remember exactly, but those speakers you could place them very, very wide and face them exactly forward, just about, with very little toe in, because their off-axis response was absolutely the same as their on axis, just up to like 30 degrees, 35 degrees. They sounded exactly the same. So you got this nice wide field, where it would blanket your couch and it would be fine. You could have them in a big theater. But I've had ones that are a lot more directional, and all of a sudden you put them out too wide and you get like this almost dead spot between them and the center channel. Now, another speaker in that same situation is going to perform better or worse depending on how it's designed and what it was designed for and who designed it and how they were what they thought was the most important trade-offs. Some tweeters and designs are going to be a lot more directional and some are going to be a lot less. So it's really hard to say. I just, generally speaking, don't love having my speakers super wide, but then again, almost every one of my theaters I've been in, it's a couch width
Right.
apart. And a lot of times, even if my couch is super wide, if you're sitting at the ends, there's a speaker right dead in front of you because I don't want them too wide. But that's more of a visual thing for me, and because it tends to be more forgiving of more directional speakers.
Yeah, well, the visual certainly plays into it as well because if you start with viewing angle, if you start with your field of view for your display and you're like me and you prefer a 45-degree field of view, well, then your speakers are going to be just to the outside of that. And that's going to anchor sounds that are panning left to right to the edges of your screen. But again, if you're like me, and in my case, I've got a small enough room and sitting close enough that even with a 45-degree field of view for my display, my speakers are outside of my display. They're not behind an acoustically transparent screen. Well, they're going to be a little bit more than a 45-degree spread because they're just going to the outsides of a 45-degree field of view. But that's basically what I prefer. I like to have my left and right speakers pretty close to the edge of my image as long as my image is big enough. Now, if I'm going down to like a 30-degree field of view for my image, I'm still probably going to have my left and right speakers at about a 45-degree spread because I don't want to get them too narrow in front, but I'm generally not in favor of having them really wide apart. I'm going to be closer to 45-degree spread in most cases, but a little bit wider because that's how wide I want my display to be.
Right. Yeah. So it's it also has a lot to do with the fact that you and I live in normal spaces.
Right.
If we were rich people with a 5,000 cubic foot theater, not a room, but a theater, where we had multiple seats and everything else, like 20 feet apart. It's about right.
Well, I guess if I could have the full 24 floor level speakers that are capable in an Atmos setup at home, then yeah, I'd probably have them out at the 30-degree angles because I'd also have, 2 more speakers between my front, left, right, and my center, because that's what Atmos can do at home. And then I'd have front wides as well. So yeah, it could change, but in general,
I still wouldn't have front wides just to piss you off. But yeah, Chris was happy with the recommendations for the Samsung CHG70 computer monitor as a small HDR capable display. But when he went to examine its specs on this webpage, he noticed that it doesn't appear to have normal VESA or VESA mounting points, and Chris needs to use his existing screen mount. Is he mistaken? Can the Samsung's adjustable table mount somehow work with a VESA mount? Or do we need to come up with a different 27-inch display that will deliver decent HDR for around $400 or less? So there's a picture here, and I don't know if you guys are seeing it, whatever, but it's the back of the TV is sort of curved, and it's got like an articulated arm that's going into like a socket. In the very smack dab in the center of this thing. And then Rob or whoever has included the other stuff that comes with it. And one of the things that comes with it is this round thing that looks like a thing that's supposed to be for the VESA mount.
That is exactly what it is an included VESA adapter that goes into that round socket on the back. So this thing actually there's like a light ring that goes around this. It just unscrews, and then there are actual screws inside to completely detach the articulating arm, which does come attached in the box. So you'll have to unscrew the little hub thing on the back, take out the screws that hold in the articulating arm. But once you do that, you can put in the included VESA mount that goes in that round socket in the middle and turns it into a 100 by 100 pattern VESA mount. That should work with any normal computer mount.
There you go. Nathan is stuck living in his RV thousands of miles from home while he waits out this pandemic. Dude, hang tough, buddy.
Yeah.
You're doing God's work there by just being inside. Keep going. You're not stuck inside. You're safe inside. Think of it that way. Yeah. You're safe inside, and not you're keeping us safe by you staying inside. So thank you very much for that. Thankfully, a relative has let him keep the RV parked on their property, but still a rather tough situation for Nathan for the time being. Dude, I hear you. Would you like my children to come visit you forever? Because I would gladly give you 1 to 3. I'm not even sure which one I would keep. Finally, if I had to keep one, I don't know. I'd have to do like the coin toss thing to see which one I would be more disappointed in keeping. I just don't know. I love my children. I want them to go very far away. To compound things, his RV has a 32-inch 768p LCD TV that Nathan says looks like crap, but it at least runs off of DC power, so his RV's batteries can power it without having to use the inefficient 12-volt DC to 110-volt AC converter. He would really like to replace the LCD, but the absolute maximum size he could fit would be a 40-inch display. 37 inches would really be ideal, as he'd love a little bit bigger screen size. Mm-hmm. So what does he have right now? 27, 32.
He's 32. Yeah.
So he's looked around online. It doesn't seem like any brand is selling 37-inch TVs. Yeah, that's probably not the case. Yeah. He was hoping Sony would have an option, since he's found that some of their displays actually have a DC inlet for power with an external power brick for normal AC household outlets, but they jump from 32 to 43, and they are priced higher than what Nathan is willing to pay. Yeah. So Sony has Vizio has a 40-inch V series, but it only has an AC power plug. Do we have any other suggestions for him? I don't. But dude, this is the sort of thing where we talked about earlier, where like we have, sometimes we come across very specific questions of very specific people. This is 2 in a row. One dude needs a computer display that's HDR, so he can sit inches away from it. And this guy needs something that you can plug into DC power. This is not everybody.
And I was like, actually, could we use a computer monitor? Because, of course, quite a few computer monitors do have a DC input. They have a wall wart or an external power brick.
And they're going to come in those weird sizes, too. They're going to come in those weird sizes.
But by and large, because he's hoping for something that can do HDR and higher resolution. That's why he was drawn to the V series. And I was like, well, hey, the Samsung CHG70. Now, the biggest one, it's a 27 or a 32. So there's no size increase for you. It would be a 32. But unfortunately, the 32... because it was big enough, they didn't use an external power brick. It's just an AC inlet on the 32. The 27-inch size does have a DC inlet, although it's a 22-volt. So you'd still need a step-up transformer from your 12-volt to your 22-volt. But even there, I was like, So I don't have a specific one to point you to. I mean, like, he knows he could get that Vizio. It's the biggest size he could go for. He could use a converter, DC to AC converter, but it is very inefficient. And unfortunately, HDR TVs draw more power. Samsung is a 22-volt DC instead of the normal 19 is what most computer monitors are. It needs a bit more power to do the HDR. So really, the best.
Wow, this really seems like a solution where VR would be the best answer for him. You know what I mean? Like getting a VR setup. I know this is not going to be cost effective, but a VR setup where you are able to, basically put the screens inches from your face, so you get that big field of view. I mean, it might not be perfect, but it would be something that you could do to get a much larger field of view, and at the same time not have to try to shoehorn some weird size TV or drain all your power or everything else. And when you're done and you're out of here, you could take it out of your RV and do other things with it. You wouldn't be stuck with having upgraded the TV in your RV that you may or may not use on the regular. I know I feel weird even suggesting it, but for me, it might be something to look into and say, okay, this is more money than I really wanted to spend on a TV right now, but this is more than the TV and something I'll be able to do something with later.
Actually, along those lines, I don't know how easy they are to get anymore, but there was a headset, and it was not VR. This was meant to just be a display on your face. It can't work with VR, but it's called the Royal Moon. And it's actually it's OLEDs in there. It's actually really good looking. The blacks are completely black. The contrast is great. And if you ever watch 3D on it, it's as good as 3D gets because it's actual separate displays for your left and right eye, and it's OLEDs, so there's no blurring or anything like that. So the Royal Moon is something you could look into, although I think they stopped manufacturing it like a little over a year ago, and I'm not sure how easy it is to still find those headsets. But yeah, I didn't even think of that. So Tom, good call on there. But if you are still just like, I want a flat panel, panel, I don't have a specific one to point you to, but I would point you to displayhdr.org. That is where all the computer monitors that are full display HDR certified are. Do not get one that is display HDR 400. You are just throwing your money away on something that will take an HDR signal but really can't show it to you. So go for at least 500 or higher display HDR certification. But I like 32 and 43 is what everybody's making these days. That's just what the LCD panel manufacturers are making, and it's a bit hard to get sizes in between. So sorry, don't have a great one for you.
All right, let us know what you come up with. We're going to do one more question, then we're going to be done because I'm falling asleep. Carlos. So if Carlos heard us correctly, we were actually okay with using a sealed sub and a ported sub together as dual subs under the right circumstances, yes? Under almost any circumstances, yes. Don't care. As long as the sub is adequately sized with adequate output for the space that it's in, I am not looking at whether or not it has a port. I do not care. There is zero amount of difference I think you're going to hear between a ported and a sealed sub. I'm sorry. I just don't think you are. But what steps should a user take to make sure that they have those right circumstances? Will it clip? Will it distort? Is it the right size? I mean, it's literally all that matters, but let's go. So the differences in tuning between the sealed and ported subs mean they lead to unwanted cancellation at certain frequencies? No. Can that all be fixed with adjusting the phase knobs? Unnecessary. How does that all work? It doesn't. So the subs put out, so if you look at the graph of a PB12,
okay,
or whatever they're calling that now, right? Is it PB12? No. PB.
Oh, like a
1,000,
2,000, whatever. But no, you could. PB.
PB. Let's just talk about a PB 1000, yeah, right? And an SB 1000. If you look at the graphs, those graphs look remarkably similar, except that at one point they start to kind of roll off at maybe slightly different angles at the end, but they look remarkably similar. The difference is one doesn't play as loud, right? One doesn't quite play as loud as the other one. The other one get a little bit louder. All right. So if you take a PB 1000 and an SB 1000, you put them both in an 11 by 12 by 8-foot room, and you have them play together, they are going to do exactly the same thing that the other one is going to do the entire time. There is not going to be any cancellations other than cancellations are going to happen because of the room. This is not how this works. It's not like the port is somehow doing something that the sealed one's not doing. It's not the way it works. They are both playing the same frequencies at the same time.
Super technically, yes, there is a slight difference in group delay, which can be related to phase response. It's in the time domain. Way down deep, below 40 hertz, which is where this starts to come into play, we are so bad at detecting phase differences at frequencies that low that it is immaterial. I mean, unless it's egregious, it's immaterial. So what matters, what you're looking for, if you're saying, here's my room size. If you get a sealed sub that can deliver flat frequency response at close to reference volume down to 20 hertz, and then you pair it with a ported box sub that can also deliver flat frequency response in your volume of air down to 20 hertz at close to reference volume, then those two things will, way down low, the ported box will probably have more headroom left than the sealed box.
Right.
That's right. What's going to happen. But
that's right. Your volume knob will not be as high on your PB 1000 as it will be on your SB 1000. It might be a minuscule difference as far as looking at it, but there will be a difference almost
now
certainly.
What could happen is you're in a given volume of air. You already have ported subs, and they're just enough. They can get you that flat frequency response down to 20 hertz, close to reference volume in your volume of air. That's what your ported subs do. And then you get the sealed box of the same family, and now it cannot, because down at 20 hertz, the sealed box will have less output than the ported box most of the time, almost all of the time. That'll be the case.
Right.
And so that is where you could start to run into the issue of you've turned it up to close to reference volume, down at 20 hertz, the sealed box in that volume of air simply cannot get there. And you're going to start to get a little bit of unevenness from seat to seat, way down deep at those frequencies where you've basically run into one of these subs is now a limiting factor. One of these subs can't do what the other sub can do way down there.
And that has nothing to do with whether or not it's sealed or not
yeah,
sealed.
Well, if you got a smaller PB.
If you had a JL Audio sealed, massive $10,000 sub in your corner, and then you put a SB 1000 on the other side of this massive
They're both
room,
sealed.
They're both sealed, or you put a PB 1000 on the other side of the room. That PB is not going to be able to keep up with that JL Audio. It's not gonna. And it's going to be the weak factor, even though it's ported. So it's not about the port or not port. It's about the ability of the sub and the size of the room.
It's about the, you got to go with weakest link in the chain here. That's what you got to sort of think of it as. So as long as both subs can play flat down to 20 hertz, close to reference volume in your given volume of air, one of them will have more headroom left, but they can both do it, and that's all that matters. And at that point, they're essentially identical subs. We're not going to worry about the little bit of group delay because we just can't hear that.
If I blindfolded you and put you in that room and I said, okay, there's two subs in here, one of them's sealed, one of them's ported. I'm playing sweeps through both of them at the same time, which is the ported one. Point to it. You couldn't point to a sub to begin with and know where it was, but you certainly couldn't pick out the sealed one over the ported or vice versa. So lastly, he says some websites talk about the inherent advantages that sealed subs have and the inherent advantages that ported sub have. Does using one sealed and one ported give you the best of both worlds?
No.
Okay. You know what some websites talk about too? How crystals can heal you. That's why we're all rubbing crystals on our eyes right now.
It's not quite to that level.
It is a little bit like that. They're like, oh, but the real inherent benefit of a ported sub is that they can play louder.
Way down low.
Just basically that's it.
Yeah.
So we've said this over and over again. You can get loud, you can get low, and you can you can get small, cheap, and low. Right? No. Yeah. Small, cheap, or low. Pick two
of those three. That's right.
Right. So you can get a small, low playing sub
like a JL Audio.
But it will not be like a JL Audio, but it will not be cheap. Okay, so for the same money, in a similar line, your ported sub is going to be able to output more. Also, notice how much larger it is than your sealed sub, right? It's going to be able to output more, and then the sealed box has an inherent, the fact that it's sealed means that the driver wants to go back to neutral as fast as it possibly can. So there's going to be less quote unquote hangover, or there's gonna be less of this
inertia. Basically, you got a spring, you got an air spring automatically inside.
That's right. So those are the inherent, but in actuality, in actual performance, in a room, it's not about those things. It's about whether or not the sub can move the amount of air it needs to move in the room that it's in.
Yeah, a lot of that came from like when people were really getting into DIY and when we were first starting to see these internet direct subwoofer companies that were building these, mega subs that nobody ever had in their houses before. Nobody had ever seen stuff like what the original SVS was doing, and when Power Sound Audio first came on the scene, and like what HSU was doing earlier. Nobody had seen subs like that at home. Nobody was doing anything like that. I mean, even Velodyne, where that was a dedicated subwoofer company, didn't have like dual 12-inch driver and something that's larger than your coffee table. Like they just weren't selling that inside of a store. It didn't exist. So when people started getting into that stuff and seeing what type of value they could get by building boxes that no store would ever stock and would ever ship to you, and it was like,
no store could even pick it up. You couldn't even put it on the floor because it was 250 pounds.
But people were like, hey, there are these inherent abilities that a huge box with a gigantic port in it can do, that like to get that type of output from a standard size box or a sealed box, the type of amplifier like literally didn't exist back then. You didn't have 2,000 watt amplifiers going back then, at least not at affordable prices that could fit inside of a subwoofer enclosure. So things have changed now. We have these remarkably powerful amplifiers that are like physically quite small, these crazy efficient Class D amplifiers that we have now. We can exert ridiculous amounts of electrical flux control over the driver, so that this idea of, oh, well, the sealed one's going to sound tighter. It's like, if you had like crappy parts, then yeah. And when we were starting with this stuff, that was kind of the case. We were dealing with like 200 watts maximum, and so much depended on how you built that enclosure and exactly what volume of air and stuff we had. But now we've got these, like, you can go get a 2,000 watt Class D amplifier for, a couple $100 or whatever, and throw it in your DIY design. We can exert crazy control over drivers now, and that works for ported drivers too. So a lot of that stuff.
When SBS first started off, they had external amplifiers.
Right. You had to.
There was no bash
because
amps that you
the
could
amplifier
put
was
inside.
half the size of this gigantic subwoofer cabinet. It was a necessity.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I mean, it's I know it's hard to divest yourself of all these things you're reading over and over and over and over and over again. Many of these things, look at the dates on them. A lot of them have been repeated for so long that they're practically folklore at this point. And it's, I mean, there are with old wives' tales and folklore, there's always an inherent kernel of truth at the bottom of it. And there is some truth. There are inherent differences and advantages that ported subs have over sealed subs, and vice versa. They exist. But when you get them into an actual room, more than anything, it's about what they can do in the room. It's like, does a thinner gas pedal have an inherent advantage over a wider gas pedal, and vice versa? Who cares when it's all about the engine, that's pushing the car, the car that it's attached to. Yes, okay, technically, if you're a race car driver, having thin pedals and small shoes and all this other stuff makes a difference. I don't know anything about racing, but you're really looking at the smallest little thing that makes no difference in the actual performance.
But we will also tell you, for the multiple listeners we've had write in who tell us they have 10,000 cubic feet that they're contending with because it's completely open floor plans, we're going to be like, get yourself some ported subs, because trying to contend with that with any sealed sub, even some, maybe you could go all the way up to the JL Audio Gotham, like you could maybe look at that, but look at the price.
Isn't Gotham ported? I thought the Gotham was ported.
I don't know. I don't think they make anything ported over at JL Audio. So, but look at the price you got to pay for that thing, right? You're getting into multiple tens of thousands of dollars now, versus you can get a crazy refrigerator-sized ported thing from Power Sound Audio that'll actually deal with 10,000 cubic feet at a price that's remarkably affordable. So, it all depends on that room size. They're working together. You can't separate the sub from the room.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's ported. I see it on eBay for $8,200.
The Gotham?
New.
I thought they were over 10,000 at least.
This is on eBay. Yes. So there you go. Here it is at the Gotham thing. All right. So
we have Ian E, Kevin A. Let's see. I put many pictures at a large size, so I have to scroll. Francisco Q, Kevin H, and Martin A. That was everybody on our list. And I did get a couple of questions, of course, that came in on Monday, so you'll be on the list as well. Don't worry.
There is definitely no ports in this thing unless it's on
I didn't
the
think
bottom.
so. JL Audio is all sealed all the time.
There was that 212s and a massive thing. Oh, the dual 13.5 inch powered subwoofer, black gloss finish, $16,500.
There you go. That sounds more like what I thought it was.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
That can get you at least two JTRs that will they will output more at 20 hertz than even the Gotham.
Right. I want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank Joseph for going to avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link and giving us a PayPal donation, as well as our 112 patrons over at patreon.com, including Kevin. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Kevin, and our
Indeed,
patrons.
Joseph. Thank you so much for that PayPal donation. Patreon.com/AVRant Podcast for anybody who'd like to sign up for a voluntary monthly donation. Thank you to our 112 patrons over there. And Kevin, thank you for being one of them.
Also want to thank a different Kevin for dropping our names over at Accessories for Less, and for Patrick, Justin, and Hank for thanking us for keeping the podcast going. You don't have to thank us. We're going to do it whether you guys listen or
But
not.
we do still
we hope that you
appreciate
listen.
it. It's very nice. Patrick, Justin, Hank, thank you for sending those messages of gratitude along, and our gratitude to everyone again for continuing to listen to us, because hey, it's nice for us to keep this going.
You're listening to us. You're inside.
That's right.
So.
And Kevin, thank you very much for talking us up to Mark over at Accessories for Less. I hope you enjoy your X7200WA. It's very nice. I almost got one of those, but I ended up with a Marantz SR7010 instead. That's how things broke.
I have Marantz MB. I've always had.
It's
Marantz
purely
MB.
the exterior case, because the insides.
It is 100% the case. It's 100% the looks. I'm not ashamed to admit that. For AV Rant, I'm Tom.
And
Hansen.
I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.